Chapter 19. A week passed. The mood in the castle was bleak. The corridor troubadours sang of pain and grief. Whenever I loosed for Ivy, I was sure the word trickster would appear on my forehead. I feared sneezing or hiccuping or fainting. I felt dizzy and feverish. At the beginning of the following week, I received 2 letters, one from home and one from Arita at finishing school. I opened them in my chamber before dressing for dinner, sitting at my window, reading by the light of the sunset. Arita's letter contained mostly questions, paragraph after paragraph of questions about the royal family, the court, and the castle. Then she wrote, "Since I received Mother's letter with your news, I've fallen asleep happy and awakened smiling. I knew eventually someone would truly see you. It took a stranger, a queen with clear eyes and extraordinary common sense. Perhaps these abilities are why the king loves her, because she recognizes quality when she encounters it." Darling Arita, I was glad she didn't know the truth. I patted her letter and smoothed out its creases. I put it aside and turned to the letter from home, which had been penned by Mother, the family chronicler. First came the family's distress over the king, then her joy over the change in all our fortunes. I basked in her excitement. Because of our wondrous wealth, a new roof had been decided upon, and a new wing was under consideration. She wrote, "The Duchess is not fond of the Queen, but then the Queen isn't a cat. We, on the other hand, cannot stop singing her praises. Please convey our feelings if you think it proper. I have no notion what's proper to convey to a queen." Evidently word of the council's dissolution hadn't yet reached home. The tone of her letter altered. "Daughter, your father insists I tell you this. We've kept it secret for fear you'd become discontented with your lot. But now you're where you belong, and you should know the truth. The courtiers are your equals. We are convinced you were highborn. You may even be a king's daughter. The blankets we found you in were velvet, hemmed with gold thread." I had to catch my breath. I looked out the window where the green of the oak leaves and the brown of the branches were saturated with dusk. The colors swam and I realized I was weeping. The woman who'd borne me and the man who'd sired me had been rich enough to keep me if they'd liked, but they'd wanted nothing to do with me. They hadn't even made sure I lived. I wondered if Arita and my brothers knew of my high birth. Probably not. They wouldn't have been able to keep the secret. I wiped my eyes and read on. "We believe you are a child of Aortha because of your voice, but we may be wrong. You could have come from anywhere, from Kyria, or Bizadel, or faraway Pooh. If people snub you, remember you may belong higher above the salt than they do. You weathered snubs at home, and see where you are now. Father and I are proud of you, as we've always been." I'd had more luck in my adoption than I'd had in my birth. No king or queen could have been kinder than an innkeeper and his wife had been. They'd taken me in, an ugly baby and an added expense, yet I hadn't been merely a charity. They'd loved me. I put the letters in the top drawer of my bureau and dressed in yet another of Dame Ethel's horrors. This one had so much draped cloth in the sleeves that they would have been useful on a sailing ship. The headdress, too, was cursed with excess cloth, which culminated in flaps that fell on each side of my face like the long droopy ears of an Aorthian hare. Ivy's gown was as different from mine as ornamental cabbage is from a rose. The cut was simplicity itself, a round neckline and a gently flaring skirt. 18 tiny silver buttons ran from neck to hem, and the cloth was deep purple silk embroidered in silver thread with tiny fleur-de-lis. As I buttoned the 18 buttons, she said, "I fear the prince may not be speaking to me at dinner." She stood. "He's vexed because I won't send anything south." There was a drought in southern Aortha, and the peasants needed food and supplies desperately. "Their lords can help them," she added. "I will not deplete my husband's coffers just because of the weather." I thought even Ivy would sympathize with starving peasants, and I felt the king's coffers were meant to be used for droughts and floods and like. She looked around. "Where's my brooch?" We couldn't find it, although we looked under everything and behind everything and rifled her drawers twice over. I didn't care if she found the brooch or not, but I had my eye out for vials and light-hold potions. No vials and no brooch. In the end she found it, an amethyst and jade pin on the dressing table in the shadow of the golden flute next to Sconey. I pinned it on and returned to what was important. The drought, you are not my adviser. I was her lark. Aza, I'm acting on good counsel. I decided she was corresponding with a friend in Caria who knew nothing of us. Still, only an enemy of Eortha would recommend ignoring a drought. I opened the door and we stepped into the corridor. A guard fell in beside each of us as we began to walk. I'd never been so close to swordsmen before. They wore breastplates and helmets, and their swords clinked with each step. For a moment I thought they were going to escort me to prison. Why are the guards here? I asked. A powerful queen should look powerful. She should seem mighty, and people may have heard my decision about the drought. No Eorthian ruler had ever before needed protection from her own subjects. Before dinner was served, I illused her part in the Song of Eortha. Tonight, as was often the case, Sir Ula's eyes rested frequently on me. I ached to know what his sharp ears were detecting. I was particularly nervous during the choral portions. I couldn't sing at full strength for both of us. I gave most of my voice to Ivy, reserving just enough for myself to keep my neighbors from wondering. When we finished, he said, "Your Majesty, the court has been waiting for your duet with Lady Aza. If you perform together at the coming scene, you'll have 2 weeks to prepare. Give us the pleasure of hearing your voices mingle." I thought my heart was going to fly out of my mouth. I had explained to Ivy that I couldn't lose a duet. She told me not to worry. She was queen, and Sir Ula was merely a subject. But he wasn't. She had no idea of his importance. She wet her lips. "Perhaps we will." Dinner was brought in with usual ceremony, each plate concealed under a domed silver cover. When all had been set down, serving maids and scullery maids, and even Frying Pan herself stationed themselves between the diners. Frying Pan's bracelets jingled lightly. Ivy clapped her hands. "A surprise!" She smiled around the table. "What do you think it might be?" At a signal from Frying Pan, the covers were removed with a flourish. Everyone's plate was piled with glistening roast hare, barley, mushrooms, onion pie. Everyone's plate except Ivy's, Jory's, and mine. We each had a mound of leavings: potato peel, picked over bones, bread crusts, eggshells, fruit rinds. I gasped. Ivy shrieked. Lady Arona laughed. Ivy rose. Her chair fell over behind her. What would Ivy do to Frying Pan and anyone else involved, and to Lady Rona for laughing? Jory laughed too, as if at a prank. He was so quick-witted. I joined in and made my laughter hearty. Lady Arona's laughter had been genuine. I could tell Jory's was forced. A singer would know the difference, but Ivy might not. The courtiers understood and laughed too. The servants began to laugh. As we made ourselves laugh, true mirth flowed in. Frying Pan had done something defiant and dangerous, and we were turning it into a jest to save her and Lady Arona. Frying Pan looked startled. Then she laughed too. Belly bellowed with laughter, her cheeks shaking, her bracelets chiming. Lady Arona sobered and then laughed again, her eyes on Jory. She knew how clever he'd been. Ivy finally laughed too, but her laughter was uncertain. When the glee subsided, Jory said to his server, "Enough merriment. Bring our dinner." A serving maid picked up Ivy's chair. She sat. Our plates were whisked away and proper ones brought back from the kitchen. A more relaxed dinner followed than any since the wedding. Conversation was easier. Songs were sung between courses, and 5 or 6 were sung after dessert. We were all giddy from relief. As we ate, I considered each old courtier, seeking resemblances to myself. This one had a pale complexion. That one had fat cheeks. This one was oversized. None looked much like me, but anyone was possible. Were any hard-hearted enough to forsake a babe? I couldn't tell. That night I couldn't sleep. Mother and father thought I belonged in the castle, but, except for Jory, I would 1,000 times rather have been at the feather bed. Here I was essential to the Queen's misrule. I was an instrument of every step she took. I thought of running away, but her vengeance on mother and father would be swift, and she'd send her guards after me. If only the king were well. If he were, I'd throw myself on his mercy. I didn't think he'd send me to prison. Since I couldn't sleep, I would put my wakefulness to use. I'd had no daytime opportunity to return to the library, but I could go now. I dressed hurriedly, lit a candle, and took a spare, plenty to last until dawn. As I traversed the halls, my excitement mounted. If I found a potion recipe or a spell, my every movement would be transformed along with my appearance. Eating would be transformed because I'd no longer picture my broad cheeks stuffed with food. Walking down a corridor would be transformed because I'd no longer feel my lumbering gait. Dressing would be transformed because every ensemble would become me. After my metamorphosis, I'd tell Ajoy what I'd done, and I'd face down everyone else. I'd faced people down over my ugliness all my life. It would be easy to face them down over my beauty. Except Ivy. I didn't know what she'd do to me. But I wouldn't be frightened out of taking this chance. She could hardly imprison me. I couldn't sing for her from a dungeon. In the library, the birds were asleep, except for a talkative whippoorwill. I went directly to the shelves that held the spells and pulled out a book called Secret Spells for Secret Uses. I sang, "A good title, but I don't know if it's overused." I made room for my candle on a shelf at eye level. The book had an entire chapter of beauty potions and spells. I turned to it and discovered why more than one spell or potion was needed, and why everyone in the castle wasn't beautiful. The first spell had to be chanted when 3 comets were in the sky at the same time. The second was written in a runic language I couldn't read. The first potion recipe required an ogre's bloody knuckle. The second called for the fur of a 6-legged cat. I remembered a book I'd seen before. No harm done, safe and simple spells. That seemed the book for me. I used up half the first candle to find it. When I finally had it, my trembling hands made turning the pages difficult. It had no potions, but the table of contents referred me to 3 beauty spells on pages 138, 187, and 363. The first spell could be done, but it involved boiling a long list of ingredients. I didn't think Frying Pan would like me preparing a spell in her kitchen. The spell on page 187 needed only to be sung. The words were in a language I didn't know, but the letters were Iothian. I hoped it wouldn't matter if I botched the pronunciation a little here and there. The spell was merely a single stanza repeated thrice. The instructions were to start out loudly and finish soft. They promised the effect would be immediate. I smoothed out my skirts and patted down my hair, as though making myself presentable to the spell. I wanted to remember the date, May the 23rd. I was 15, but this would be my true beginning. I sang as loud as I could. Hyong Weon, Chiang Lea, Chiang Lea, Ixeonong, Lea Ixeonong Myoy, Eonong Myoy Evyong Twa, Myong Evyong Twa Praying, Heang Tia Prayong Eng Eong. I stopped reading. The words came as if I'd memorized them. I didn't sing softer deliberately. The spell was taking over. Hyong Weong, Chiang Lea, Chiang Lea, Ixeonong, Lea Ixeonong, Myoy, Eonong Myoy Evong Twa, Myoy Hong, Twa Preong, Hong Twa Preong Ong Yong. My singing was reduced to a mutter. I could barely move my jaws. Hyong Weong, Chiang Lea, Chiang Lea, Ixeonong, Lea Ixeonong, Myoy, Eonong Myoy Ezong Twa. I took a breath, although I almost couldn't make my chest expand, but I had to finish the spell. Myoy Evong Twa Praying, Hang Twa Praying, Hang Hoyang. Was I beautiful? I couldn't move. I was frozen in place. The spell book was about to fall out of my hands, but I couldn't clasp it tighter. I couldn't swallow. I didn't know if I was breathing or not. I couldn't feel air enter or leave my nose. My chest certainly didn't move. Couldn't move. The book fell. My right thumb broke off and fell with it. I felt a moment of pure pain, and then nothing. I had been turned to stone.